I'm Jeff Bennett. I've been certified by DCSA and some professional organizations to perform as an FSO and protect classified information. Here's my contact information. Most of you know me anyway. But my experience, I've worked several years as an FSO, and then I went and joined the government and worked in the G2 shop as a civilian. Did that for a few years, and then got introduced to program protection, where I've helped organizations identify what is critical. I've helped folks build security classification guides. So basically, I worked in an Army G2 at a government contracting agency, which I'll describe what that is in a minute, to identify and protect classified information, then flow requirements down to contractors. While I was doing this, I also worked as a system security engineer, or I went from the government back to contracting and worked at the Army Research Technology and Protection Center, where I did assessments on weapon systems, and again worked on the security class guides and worked on identifying critical information that needed to be protected. And then did that for a few years as a contractor. Then I stepped out and opened my own company. I found a really good niche where I go in and I help small companies of about 150 or fewer. I can do larger companies with special projects. But I found out in this space that FSOs were not security professionals, but they were professionals who wore the FSO, and FSO is the security manager for the company, where the FSO was not a security professional, but rather a appointed position, and they wore many other hats. My mission, whatever role I'm in, is to facilitate a strong defense industrial base by aligning subcontractors, prime contractors, and government program offices with these security requirements. And that mission is also a mission of the NISP, the National Industrial Security Program. I wanted to show you that this presentation comes directly out of the NISPOM. It's also part of a course that I developed called the NISPOM Fundamentals course. It's a 20-hour course that's recorded and can be accessed and viewed. And it was meant to teach or provide professional development for security managers. What I realized is there are some things that the NISPOM describes as FSO tasks, and it's mostly focused on facilities that work on classified information in-house. However, what is not described are those non-possessing contractors who have clearances but perform elsewhere. And so I saw that there was a gap there and wanted to fill it in with little seminars like this. And a lot of this seminar comes out of the NISPOM and as well as out of some books I've written called The Insider's Guide to Security Clearances, and tells people who are new, who don't have clearances, how to go through and get their clearance. And then also the other one is how to get U.S. government contracts and classified work. It is a book that is based on the NISPOM and describes FSO tasks and provides recommendations. And all of these can be found at nispom.com. So that's the background. We're going to talk about the NISP, the National Industrial Security Program, and NISPOM. And then we'll go as a background of why security clearances are required and why the background check for the facility. And then we'll go into the actual facility and the facility clearance and see how that is done. So I'm giving you a little bit of insight. Again, a lot of experienced FSOs or security professionals have not ever had to go through this process to bring a new company to the level of where they get a clearance. And I'm going to tell you guys, I've been doing this a long time, and it is a really frustrating event. It's always good to have a guide through difficult events because I'm going to show you what is required, and I'm going to show you that there's not a lot of communication on how to get there. I'm currently bringing a company through their facility clearance right now. So we have to start at the higher level called the National Industrial Security Program. The NISP is managed by the government. So the government determines what is classified, and they determine that, hey, to get our weapon systems and to get our services that we need to bring in contractors. So the government says that they will support the NISP by providing guidance on what needs to be protected and notifying the defense industrial base of what needs to be protected and how to protect it. On the other hand, the defense industrial base says, Yes, we recognize that you're going to provide us classified information. So the way the contracting works is you have something called the government contracting activity, and it's basically that government entity that issues contracts. It could be a PEO, it could be a major command, but they are the ones that issue contracts to prime contractors. The Defense Counterintelligence Agency is the third party government organization that does oversight. Those of you who work with the government know that there are security audits and security reviews performed in-house by the Government Security Office, and in the Army, it's the G2. They go down to the program offices and inspect their ability to protect classified information. However, in the contracting world, the government contracting activity issues contracts and provides the classified information, but they don't typically go to the contractor to do oversight. So they do oversight through the DCSA. I'm not saying they never do it. There are situations where the government indeed does go down to certain areas to provide those reviews. But while the government contracting activity might go to a contractor to look at quality, to look at cost schedule and performance, they're going to do that with the potentially the contractor's program manager. But in the case of the auditing for protection of classified material, that's done through the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, and they interact directly with the FSO. In a well-run program, the FSO is interacting directly with the DCSA, but coordinating with their program manager as well as the GCA. Now, once the GCA determines that they are going to provide a classified contract, they will provide that classified information to the contractor only when they have their security clearance. And they're going to notify the contractor what is classified through statements of work, through the DD Form 254, which is indeed the classified part, the classified contract description, the security classification guide that describes what is classified, and then on classified documents or classified markings that are provided on source documents. So, for example, if the company is performing classified work in-house, they're going to have potentially source documents that describes the work and describes the requirements that might be classified, and then the contractor will work on those documents to perform their tasks. That's the NISP. Now, the NISP has an operating manual, and it's the National Industrial Security Program Operating Manual, and it's the instructions to the defense industrial base on how to manage classified information. And so with the NISPOM, we get directions on preventing unauthorized disclosure, controlling authorized disclosure, meaning you're going to provide classified information to people with a clearance and need to know, and they've signed their SF-312. That's basically the NDA between the person and the government. So this NISPOM, I've got a copy right here. Most of you have seen a NISPOM, but this is a NISPOM. It's rather thick, and it's great reading for bedtime. So professional FSOs read it regularly and go to it, but it takes a little bit of getting used to if you're not a professional FSO and if you're an FSO with appointed duty. It's rather thick, but you're going to need to understand what it says. All right, so again, we are going to talk about the facility clearance. How does my entity get a security clearance? And so we're going to talk about that security clearance sponsorship. What is a clearance sponsorship? And what can I do to prepare for a security clearance sponsorship? And I've been sponsored, now what? And then how do I prepare for the DCSA's requirements to become a classified, a cleared facility? And see if, as we go through, if you can answer those questions, and we'll have a wrap up at the end. All right, so an entity eligibility determination. That used to be called a facility clearance in the old NISPOM. When we went to the new NISPOM, we call it now an entity eligibility determination. Well, we don't really. We still call it an FCL because the first words are too hard to say. So DCSA does a background investigation and makes a determination of whether or not a facility or a contracting entity is a trusted entity and can maintain a security clearance. But it also must be consistent with national security interest. What does that mean? Well, that's what the NISPOM says, but Jeff says it means you have a legitimate contract from a government contracting activity or a prime contractor. So the DCSA also provides guidance to the FSO during this process. And then this is a key point. When you're in sponsorship, do not go and access classified information until you get your final clearance. Remember, you're going through the process, you're not there yet. So your government contracting activity or your prime contractor should not be providing any classified information during the sponsorship period until that clearance is granted. All right, so what is sponsorship? And how do I get an FCL, a facility clearance? Well, the sponsorship is basically the government contracting activity or a prime contractor makes a determination that your organization is the one they need to perform on that contract. Now, what I always recommend people is they ask me, hey, can I get a clearance so that I can compete on classified contracts? It's a really good question, a legitimate question. But the reality is you do not need a clearance to compete for a contract. You just need the clearance to be able to work on the contract. So my recommendation is always sell yourself, sell your organization. A lot of these questions come from people who want a personnel security clearance, meaning I want a clearance so I can get a job at a major contractor. Well, I always have to advise them, sell yourself. Get the job. If they really want you, they'll put you somewhere where you can work while they take risk of getting your clearance. Now, security clearances are absolutely not paid for by the contractor. It is paid for by customer by our taxes. So there's no money needs to be spent by the contractor. The money is negligible. It's overhead for those who are performing the tasks, and fingerprints cost $35. So it's a negligible cost. The government takes the biggest cost for the investigations and getting that clearance. So if you're an organization, you just really need to appeal to a prime contractor or a government contracting activity representative to convince them that you are the one that they need to perform your services or buy or provide your products to them. There's 13,000 cleared contractors in America, so there's space. There's space for others. So what you want to do is sell yourself to that prime contractor to get a sub or to that government entity if you know anybody there. Here's one thing that surprised me that a lot of contractors asked me. A lot of contractors start their first contract with a low number of contract. I've seen people have their first classified contract for a few $100,000 over a year. And then when they asked me how did they get another classified contract, I tell them, ask for one. Once you have your sponsorship, all you need to do is continue to get classified work and get additional 254s. You do not need to go through this process again unless your clearance gets suspended or you administratively terminate it. Then you have to go through the process again. But you will have to go through a sponsorship process if you upgrade. So if you have a secret contract, and somebody wants you to do a top secret, you'll have to go through the process again to get that top secret contract. And another way to get a contract is a subcontract. So you convince a contractor that you are their subcontractor, that they need to do the job. So the contractor will award a contract to the subcontractor and sponsor that award. And then DCSA will take that award and there'll be some coordination there. But then DCSA will contact the subcontractor, and the subcontractor will provide information to DCSA, and then so it goes. So it's the same kind of process, but it just depends on who's sponsoring you, a contractor or the GCA. The contractor cannot sub a subcontract unless the GCA approves a contract, and it's really hard to get a classified contract below this sub-tier level. All right, so here's the sponsorship process. The government wants to sponsor a contractor, so they submit a sponsorship. The sponsorship request has names of key personnel from the company, and then they provide a classified contract information in the DD Form 254. They submit that in a government system and it goes to the DCSA. The DCSA will review that information and then contact the customer. And I'll show you how they contact. So to be eligible for a contract, you have to be a defense contractor. You have to register at sam.gov, obtain your cage code. And then once you do that, and there's a lot of steps to getting your becoming a defense contractor. But I will tell you, those contracts or those documents that you upload into sam.gov to get approved as a defense contractor are the same exact information that DCSA needs for your sponsorship. Articles of incorporation, board resolutions, meeting minutes, line charts, line and block charts, org charts, business licenses, all that stuff. So that's a lot of information to get together. And then you'll be required to sign an NDA between the entity and the government, and then sign a form that shows how much and to what extent you might be under foreign ownership, control, and influence. And then we've got to talk about key management personnel, and we've got to get their security clearances. So by day 20, we have to go into the government database and upload everything that the DCSA requested. And then we also do want to do some pre-work, and that is to get our key management persons ready for their security clearances, because this information has to be submitted by day 20. And then by day 45, we've got to submit people for their security clearances. And then it's a waiting game. We wait to see what the government wants. So keep in mind, depending on the complexity of the situation, it could cost 20 to 40 hours or maybe up to 60 hours to gather the information that you need. So 20, 40 hours, consider that, especially if your company is small enough and does not have a security professional. So that means somebody at the leadership level is going to have to handle these tasks. And so 20 to 60 hours is a lot if you are taken off your main tasks. So you've been sponsored. How do you know you've been sponsored? Well, you're going to get an email from the DCSA that says, hey, just want to let you know we've received information that you need to be sponsored. And they identify you as a company, your cage code, your FCL level of the sponsorship request, and who actually submitted the sponsor. And then you might get another email from the government that says, hey, you are sponsored. Now, we've got to get some information from you. You've got a certain amount of time to do it. You got 20 days to get us this information, and you've got 45 days to get the clearances. Man, what information, what clearances? We don't know. So let's look at the next slide. All right. We need you to watch these orientation videos. It will show you what you need to provide. And then you get an FCL orientation handbook. You can download that from here. Again, it tells you what to do, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. And there are so many websites to register for before you can apply much of these tasks. For example, request a NISS account. This is directly out of their email, right? So you request a NISS account here. And then it says how to submit a clearance package in NISS. So what do we do once we get to NISS? Well, you can't get a NISS until you get a PKI certificate. That's another background check, guys, and it takes a few weeks to get your certificate. So already time is burning while you're trying to upload things in a NISS, which you're not eligible or able to do at this point. So this is a warning order that if you are going to be getting ready for a clearance, let's start by tell all your friends, try to get your PKI vendor. I'm sorry, PKI vendor is, there's a specific encryption key that you need to be able to access these government websites. And you can either have a PKI certificate or certificates found in the normal common access card. All right, so this is what we need to submit in sam.gov. KMP list, I'll talk about what a key management personnel is later. So we've got to submit these forms and these articles that I talked about later. It's a lot to do, so I recommend setting up a tracking sheet. Okay, I need to get my PKI or my CAT card before I can even open a NISS account. Now I can request my NISS account, And now I need to upload all this stuff. So it's good to say who is doing this task and what the status is, because we need to get it done. And it goes quick because it includes weekends. 20 days includes weekends. All right, so now we have key management personnel. Again, I mentioned people need to be cleared before they get their facility clearance. And what is a key management personnel? Those folks that are absolutely necessary. As a minimum, they're going to be the senior management official, the insider threat program senior official, and the FSO. If you're small enough, it can all be the same person. But the key is that this senior management official must be an officer of the company that can commit the company to decisions. So it may be better to, if your company is large enough, to spread these tasks out among different employees. Additional key management personnel are going to be CEOs, chairman of the boards, and other company officers and directors as determined by DCSA. And the reason that it's important to identify these key management personnel is because DCSA is going to make a determination of who needs to be cleared, and it's going to be by company structure and who needs to be cleared to better manage the protection of classified information. All right, so the senior management official, NISPOM is explained as they own the security program. They own the insider threat program. Doesn't mean they work it, but they own it, and they need to approve all decisions and understand. DCSA is starting to ask more questions of the senior management official to make sure that they are actually owning their security program and coordinating with the facility security officer. The senior management official appoints the insider threat program senior official and the facility security officer, writes a letter of appointment. Now, the SMO is not appointed, but they are identified in board resolutions and other official documentation of the organization. And that's how DCSA determines who that SMO is. The facility security officer executes that security program. They're writing the policies, the procedures, they're writing the training, they're delivering the training, and they're managing everybody's security clearance. Again, I mentioned this could be 20 to 40 hours a month, and it could be a burden to your organization if you appoint the wrong person. For example, if you appoint it to an engineer or to a senior vice president, it's going to take them out of what they need to do to move the company forward into performing these tasks. And so the 20 to 40, 60 hours taken off their shoulder will allow them to commit to their job. The DCSA is going to look at all the shareholders and the owner of the company. They're going to look at what type of organization you have so they can better determine who is going to be those KMP. Again, these three are automatically key management personnel. They automatically must be able to obtain their security clearance. If any one of these are not able to get a clearance, then the company won't get its clearance. There are other key management personnel that I mentioned. Not all of them have to get a clearance, and they can be excluded. All the KMP in a sole proprietorship are going to be one person. They're going to hold all the roles. In general and limited partnerships, we've got partners, executive committee members, and in joint ventures, the joint venture company may need a clearance. And in the joint venture company, we might look at the partners. Each member of the joint venture company may be KMP as well. It's up to us to identify and for DCSA to make that determination. So 6 awesome ways to delay a facility clearance or be denied for security clearance. So wrong address, missing documents, KMP list is inconsistent. They scrutinize this and they will send it back. And if you miss a timeline, you probably won't be able to get your clearance. So be thorough, be complete. What is the security clearance sponsorship? Hopefully you'll be able to answer that by it's a determination by a prime contractor or the government contracting activity that you're the contractor that performs on task and they really need you. What can I do to prepare for security clearance sponsorship? Well, you need to put some hours in and you need to be committed to the task because I've shown you that the tasks aren't exactly step by step. And it's going to take 20 to 60 hours to perform these tasks, especially if you are getting all of your information from reviewing handbooks and videos that don't exist. Now I've been sponsored. Now what? Now it's time to get all your accounts and get uploaded. But I'd always advise you to start preparing, get all these documents in one place. If you don't have them, it's time to start creating. But there's some other ways to prepare. One is, do you need help doing this? You might want to line up some consultants, some advisors, or maybe an outsourced FSO to get through this. Because again, it's no joke. An outsourced FSO can provide this to you so that you do not need to spend 20 to 60 hours a month preparing and getting ready for this. All right, so we talked about the NISP, we talked about sponsorship, and we answered questions about sponsorship and the facility security clearance process. Again, I mentioned about the dedicated level of work that needs to be done to be able to go through this clearance process. I mentioned earlier that I am a consultant and I do have clients that I help through this process. And I offer services such as helping people acquire their FCL. I perform FSO functions for many of my clients. I write and prepare and present FSO training, and I help companies prepare for DCSA audits. I have the tools and proprietary information necessary to help you get this through this quickly. It's just my own way of getting things organized. You know, if you're a do-it-yourself FSO, you might want to go to NISPOM.com. This is pretty much set up for security professionals who want to do this themselves, but may need some professional development opportunities or get CEUs for their certifications. On this site, I have the Essential FSO Workbook. It has forms, tools, PowerPoint presentations, policies, and procedures that you can use to start your own FSO workbook. NISPOM compliance package are videos that your employees can go to get their security awareness and their insider threat training, and you can get those there. And then I have an FSO professional development track that includes most of these products, plus that training called NISPOM Fundamentals. Or if you just need policies and procedures, you can go to nispom.com to get those. I'd like to invite you also, I have a free membership to something called school.com NISPOM Central. I'm going to provide these slides to you guys, but if you hit this link, you're invited to join for free. And then there we will be hosting talks and working on our FSO professional development. So everybody's invited to go there.